Activision and Xbox, it's going to close in less than a week. Here's what to expect next. After what feels like an eternity, that is the only way to describe it, the Microsoft Activision Xbox deal looks to be closing next week, specifically on Friday the 13th, which, if you're superstitious, may not be a great day, but you know what? That is what Microsoft is pushing towards, and that is what we are expecting, according to The Verge. And so, really, at this point, the deal is in the pockets of the CMA, the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK, and they're fully expected to look at Microsoft's revised deal and approve it, and it's supposed to be done looking like next week, with Microsoft looking to ship over the bucket of money, and bucket is underselling it, to Activision, and finally, and absolutely, close the deal, what we hope is for the very last time, and then we can begin to move on. And this is obviously a really big deal because this is the largest deal in gaming history. This is the largest acquisition in Microsoft's history ever, and Microsoft is trying to get this done before October 18th. That is the next earnings call for Activision. Typically, that's when they report it. So they're trying to get it done, get this all wrapped up prior to that happening, and just starting to begin the very long process of integrating Activision into the world of Xbox and Microsoft and their mobile and everything else. And so it's going to be a significant journey, and people are expecting things to happen quickly. And while Microsoft will try to capitalize upon this as quick as possible, here's what you could honestly probably more likely to expect. First off, there's already some things showing up. Now, this came from a screenshot from Twitter where a user was trying to, it looks like, purchase Call of Duty Black Ops 2, and it was already saying that it was part of their subscription. Although, obviously, this hasn't been announced that Microsoft or Activision or anybody else is bringing Call of Duty to Game Pass. Now, the reality here is that the truth is probably somewhere in between. Technically speaking, like all legality aside, Microsoft can't tell Activision what to do until that money has hit the bank account of Activision. That cannot happen. That doesn't mean that Activision couldn't proactively start trying to do some work, because they know how to get things into Game Pass and start doing some work on their back catalog, so that when the deal does close, Call of Duty in the back catalog only potentially could be moving to Game Pass faster. We've seen some servers come back online. We've seen some things happening sort of behind the scenes, and this was a screenshot showing up. And, take obviously everything with a little pinch of salt. We know the deal is going to close, but whether or not this stuff is going to happen quickly, that will be time. Time will tell us the true story. I absolutely believe that the whole entire Call of Duty back catalog will arrive in Game Pass. That would be crazy for it not to. However, how long that is actually going to take. Now, if you're sitting here saying, Brad, the one I actually care about is the one that was just announced, Modern Warfare 3. Is that should be hitting, right? Well, no, do not expect that at all. And actually, we have some documentation that really says don't expect it, honestly, anytime soon. When Microsoft was going through all the CMA stuff from back over the summer, it was noted in some of the documentation that Call of Duty arriving in Game Pass may not happen day and date, meaning as a launch title, until 2025, which is likely their first Call of Duty to release after Sony's deal would have then expired. The marketing deal is what I'm referring to, not bringing it to PlayStation, but the actual marketing component. So you might be actually waiting a while potentially for that day and date. It doesn't mean that they couldn't bring it eventually in like 6 months, but I would not expect Microsoft to close this deal, their largest ever, and then immediately shove it into Game Pass, where we already know that every Call of Duty that launches makes $1 billion. And so that would be a really tough pill for Microsoft and Xbox to swallow. Yes, they would get a big surge in Game Pass growth, but it's not going to be $1 billion like they would expect. And besides, if they play their cards right, which they're going to go, it looks like kind of, I don't want to say low and slow. I think that would be completely undermining a lot of this. Is that they're gonna grab that revenue, and they will continue to sort of milk it and make these huge PR waves. It's like X titles have entered Game Pass, that sort of thing. For probably all of 2024, really just building up that catalog of what's available in Game Pass. So just keep in mind, while this is giving us some good hope that, hey, you're going to be able to play any old title effectively in Game Pass very soon, or it gives the idea that it's going to be soon. The new stuff, the latest hits are not going to be there. Now, keep in mind, Warzone, which is one of their most popular titles, is already a free game, right? That is already a free game. So Warzone would show up in quote-unquote Game Pass already because it's a free title. So there you go. That sort of thing is coming along. Now, the question becomes like, okay, Microsoft closes, and then what happens? You got to remember, one of the things that's still outstanding is what's going to happen to Bobby, right? When Microsoft initially proposed this, or signed the deal that says, hey, we're going to try to buy you, there was a lot of hot water around what was going on in Activision. Now that things have settled down because because basically the acquisition has taken over all the noise and sucked up all the air in the room when it comes to Activision. But there was a lot of sort of drama around that, and it's expected that Bobby Kotick will exit the company. We don't know how quickly that will happen. However, it was anticipated when I went back and looked at my notes from when this was announced. It looked like it was going to be happening like really quickly, or he may not make it at all over to Microsoft. He will cash his check, sell out his shares, and then move on with life. And that was kind of the expectation at the time. Whether or not that is still the expectation today remains to be seen. Now, there's other aspects of this acquisition that really need to be talked about as well. First of all, when you have a company the size of Activision and you have a company the size of Microsoft, there's going to be overlapping roles. Now, I'm not expecting layoffs. Typically, these things don't happen like, hey, the acquisition happened, like let's start slamming the axe down. However, it is very common with acquisitions of this size that there will be layoffs, more than likely a part of this at some point in the future. As an example, accounting and finance are typically pretty much made redundant because Microsoft already has accounting and finance. Yes, there will always be local people on the ground who need to be doing things day in and day out, those types of tasks. But when it comes to decision makers, CFOs, middle and upper management, those roles typically aren't always needed after an acquisition. However, Activision is really large, so there's definitely going to be retained some, but you're not going to need all of those roles. Same with IT as well. Microsoft has capacity. They have servers. They have infrastructure people. And so there's likely going to be that in some capacity. Same on the marketing side. These are the sort of things that happen when an Activision size acquisition does happen. The other thing too, I'll be really interested to see is there an Xbox reorg after this deal gets done? I'm sure Microsoft already has it laid out internally about how they're going to structure and where Activision will live within the org chart and people's roles and everything else. But this is a huge company. I think they said alone they have like 3,000 developers, or engineers, I should say, working on Call of Duty. That's just one title. Granted, it is their biggest title and it is a huge title, but that's a lot of people. How is Xbox going to structure this? Are they truly going to let Activision sit out on their own and just do their own thing? Clearly, they have the capacity and ability to continuously ship Call of Duty titles. That is their sort of factory, if you will, that keeps the lights on, right? This thing's an annual release, and they've done a good job so far, and so they'll continue to do all that. However, Microsoft has also learned a pretty painful lesson this past year or so, especially with a title like Redfall at release sometimes, that being too hands-off isn't always a good thing. And so we'll wait and see how Microsoft does this, right? Matt Booty plays a big role with these game studios. We'll see. Microsoft is a little mixed on their history with these titles, and so Starfield obviously did pretty darn well, at least appears that way. Same with Forza, and there's others that have done well. Halo is on the opposite side. Redfall is on the opposite side. So Microsoft, there's no definitive action here. It's more of like, hey, what's just going to be happening once Microsoft really wraps this up? So these are the things that I like to see, is how Microsoft moves the chess pieces internally to organize their stuff, to make sure that everybody's on the same page, the games launch on time, the games launch with the right marketing that they need, because Call of Duty does a great job with marketing. And so there's a little bit other information I want to bring up too, because it all relates to this acquisition as well. And this slide comes from Tweaktown, and we already know that the data that they're using here to extrapolate some numbers that Microsoft might be targeting for Game Pass growth are a bit outdated. However, I think it has some validity to it, and so it really looks like that Microsoft's target at one point was to get to 110 million subscribers by 2030. Now that obviously is likely including Activision. That's likely including rolling over Game Pass into the core model, which they have now done. And so you can begin to see that Microsoft has a target somewhere around that. Now, we know that data is outdated based on what was provided in the courts and even the timeline here itself. However, we also know that things like the Keystone, the little cloud-only box, did not ship. We don't really know if it's going to ship. So the cloud number here might already be skewed quite a bit. Also, we don't see mobile, but mobile could be cloud. We don't really know. And other X factors that we'll never know, at least based on the data that was provided to the courts, and this is still playing out, is can Microsoft eventually launch a proper game store on iOS, like a native game store? These things would all impact these subscriber numbers and could influence them one way or another. But it's the reason I bring this up is, well, it's not perfect data. It does give us a bit of a line in the sand about where Microsoft's head is at, about the numbers that are needed to make Game Pass truly viable at the end of the day. And so where Microsoft hopes to get its growth. So over 100 million Game Pass subscribers would be a phenomenal number for Microsoft. And they've got a lot of tools after this deal closes. Now, granted, the deal may not close on Friday. That's the expectation, right? The CMA could throw another wrench in, but I think at this point, it's pretty much on track to close next week, which is, finally going to put the line in the sand for this. And we'll continue to see. Like, this is something, not just myself, like the entire gaming industry and the entire tech community is going to be watching very closely. When you have an acquisition of nearly $70 billion dues, you don't just get to escape that and say, oh yeah, we're not going to talk. Like, this is very much a material move for Microsoft, and we expect that they are going to make significant growth from it in Xbox. And it will be super fun to watch, just like it'll be super fun to stay subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.